Tonight we're joined by Dr. John Golden. We're going to be talking about the amazing microbiome, that part of our body that affects almost everything. Now, what you're going to learn tonight is about how these bacteria in our body cooperate with the key systems of our body to affect almost everything, to affect memory and leaky gut and food sensitivities. They have an effect on Alzheimer's, depression, attention deficit disorder. Amazing band of effects, I guess I want to say, from the microbiome. First, introducing Dr. Golden here. Dr. Golden's a medical director and founder of the Golden Center for Health and Healing. Dr. Golden's a graduate of Northwestern Medical School and has completed a postdoctorate fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona. He's also board certified in family medicine, geriatrics, and integrative and holistic medicine. Dr. Golden's a certified homeopath, a senior instructor in clinical homeopathy, and for several years, Dr. Golden's been the winner of the Patient Choice Award, which is awarded to only the top 3% of doctors rated by patients. And he's the most compassionate doctor award, which has been given to the top 4% of doctors. Dr. Golden, great to have you on the line with us here tonight.
Thanks, George. It's always great to be here.
You know, Dr. Golden, we see all kinds of advertisements for probiotics. The words microbiome are kind of getting out there in the public a little bit, but what is the microbiome? What is that?
That's a great question, and I really want to kind of clarify that to begin with. The microbiome actually refers to all the microbial organisms that are in and on our body. So they say that we actually have more microbes on our body or in our body than there are stars in the Milky Way. Just to give you a picture of the enormity of this. Now, 95% of those are in our gut. Okay, that's why we give it so much attention, is because of the enormity of what's in the gut. And they say that we have 150 times the genes that are in our microbiome as we have genes in the rest of our body.
Wow.
So just again, more of the enormity of that. And we have almost twice as many microbes in our body as we have cells in our body. So again, just the enormity of the contribution and the impact that these microbes have on our overall health, to the point where some people say that as much as 90% of disease can be linked to disruption of the normal microbiome in our gut. So an enormous impact that it has on our overall health.
It really is a huge awareness that's dawning on physicians and researchers. And but why is it that so many people have their microbiome out of balance, putting them at risk? What are the major threats?
Well, there's all sorts of them, George, and it even begins with what's going on in our parents, in our mother especially. So from the time of our birth, our mother's microbiome determines what our microbiome is when we're born. And so you see a different microbiome that occurs from somebody who's born vaginally as opposed to somebody who's born cesarean. You see a different microbiome for someone who's breastfed as opposed to someone who's not breastfed. You see a different microbiome based upon what you eat, what you're raised on as you're growing up. And then you have all of these other external factors that figure into it. Things like antibiotics, that's an obvious one that we see. Also stress is another one we see. But we also have to remember that we live in a sterilized environment. And so we are constantly assaulting our gut microbiome with things like hand sanitizers and chlorine in our water and fluoride in our water, which all have some antimicrobial properties. We also have all these household chemicals, some of which have antibiotic properties. We have all of these things that we use for pesticides that have antibiotic properties. So all of these things have an assault on our microbiome, even the food that we eat, because a lot of what happens in our microbiome is determined by what we eat, because the animal flesh that we eat has been treated many times with antibiotics. So their microbiome is distorted, and then we consume that, and that affects, they have the antibiotics in their flesh, and then we have that as part of our, an effect on our own microbiome. So there's all sorts of different influences that we're exposed to on a daily basis that can affect this delicate balance that we have in our gut. And you need to remember that our gut microbiome is a very dynamic organ. And it's an organ because we have to consider it that way. If we took all the bacteria in our gut and we weighed it, it's almost 4.5 pounds.
Wow.
So that's about 3/4 the weight of our head. So you have a tremendous amount of impact of these trillions of organisms that we have on our body. And they're influenced all the time. There's changes going on. And we have to focus on a couple things, George. And I'm sorry to monopolize the conversation here, but it's not really about who's there. It's really about what's the neighborhood like? What's the ecology of the gut like? And that's the things that that causes all the disturbances. It's changes in the ecology, it's changes in the environment in the gut that really affects the balance of these organisms.
So as a physician, when patients are coming into your office, I would imagine if a young woman is planning to get pregnant and have a family, you're thinking having this biome in balance is going to be critically important to the health of the child. And other people that come in as patients, so they're having different kinds of disorders, you really want to get that into balance right away, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, George. I mean, it's very important to look at that. You know, you talk about young women who are getting pregnant or wanting to get pregnant. We haven't even talked about the influence that hormones have on that. So people that take synthetic hormones, for instance, birth control pills, that also has a distorting effect on the microbiome. So we want to do all that we can to bring that in balance. And we all should be focusing on that on a daily basis. We all should be aware that this is not something to be taken for granted, because the impact of a disrupted microbiome is catastrophic. And I see that all the time in my practice.
You know, when you say it's catastrophic, what are some of the resulting disease states that at least have a major element in their cause coming from the microbiome?
Well, like I said, that some people now are saying as many as 90% of the diseases that we see in our current civilization, our current culture, are related to disruption of that. And that includes even things like obesity. It includes diabetes. It includes heart disease. There's been literature that shows that the gut microbiome is related to increased inflammation. So you have all of your potential autoimmune disorders, because there's a phenomenon that occurs when you have this disruption of the microbiome that is called leaky gut. And leaky gut is where the junctions between the cells in the small intestines get disrupted and spread apart. And that allows the transfer of food particles, chemical toxins, bacteria, and other things to get from the lining of from the inside of the intestinal tract into the bloodstream, where there is this tremendous autoimmune reaction, because our immune system is designed to detect things that don't belong there. And when these things traverse the lining of the intestinal tract and get into the bloodstream, the immune system recognizes these things as being foreign, and it creates an immune reaction. And that's where all the catastrophe comes from. It creates this inflammatory reaction, and all of the different things that we've talked about are things, the obesity, diabetes. What we are seeing now in terms of disease is only the tip of the iceberg. And what we're going to see later on, as we continue to disrupt the microbiome, is going to be increasing levels of obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, and other significant illnesses that are going to tax the healthcare system in this country and around the world, actually.
I know a famous physician, Dr. David Perlmutter, wrote a book, Brain Maker, and he actually associates the upset in the microbiome with depression and even some Alzheimer's disease and autism spectrum disorder with young children.
That's exactly right. And we've seen that, and especially that's when we take it back to the whole issue of what's the environment when we're born, and what is the influence on the gut microbiome in early childhood. You know, I have seen kids in my practice that come into the office, and they have this huge atopic dermatitis. They have rashes all over their body, and they were born cesarean, and the mother didn't breastfeed. And so they ended up having this distorted microbiome. And until we actually address that, we can't really impact the dermatitis, because what happens is that most people won't look at the gut. What they'll do is they'll say, oh, well, here's a steroid cream. We'll just put the steroid cream on there, and the steroid cream will clear up the inflammation. Well, that's like treating the leaves of the tree. It's not really looking at the roots where all the problem develops.
Well, that's really important to look at the roots. That's one of the things you look at in alternative and functional and integrative medicine is you say to yourself, what's out of balance in this person? That's your first look, isn't it?
Right. So I like to say that in functional medicine, we answer the question why, whereas in conventional medicine, we answer the question what? What's wrong with you? In functional medicine, we answer the question why is what's wrong with you wrong with you? So we like to dig deep. We like to turn over the stones that haven't been turned over so that we can find what's missing. And what I think of, and one of the basic tenets of functional medicine, is that if you have inflammation in your body, the majority of the time you're going to find that arises from disruption of the gut microbiome.
And inflammation by itself is a critical part of so many diseases.
It absolutely is. I mean, you think about it. We have inflammation in autoimmune disorders. We have inflammation in cardiovascular disease. We have inflammation in inflammatory bowel disease. Think about allergies, asthma, arthritis. All of these inflammatory conditions are brought about by disruption of that gut microbiome. And there is an inflammatory marker that is able to be measured as a result of this leaky gut. It's called lipopolysaccharide. And I could talk with you for hours about that, but I know our time is limited, so I'm going to shut up.
Okay, well, the microbiome is critically important to all these different diseases. Now, at Orenda International, we don't cure, treat, or mitigate diseases. What we do is we create products to help reestablish balance in these critical systems of the body, including the microbiome. And in that area, we created a product called Orenda Ease, because we thought it's just too much for most consumers. They've got to go out and they've got to find an enzyme, and they got to find a probiotic, and they've got to find a prebiotic. They got to find a systemic to deal with inflammation. And we've been able to put all of that into a single product. We're continually researching the leading edge of what's best. Why are you enthusiastic about that product as you practice in medicine?
Well, it goes back to what I said initially, George. It's not about who's living there, it's what's the quality of the neighborhood. It gets back to the ecology. It gets back to what is the internal environment there in the gut. And so when we talk about this, what we want to look at is what's there in the gut that doesn't belong there, and what's missing in the gut that should be there that's not. And what we try and do with the Orenda Ease is we try and address those issues. So the first thing we do is we have the digestive enzymes in there. Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that the body is breaking down the food that we're taking in efficiently so that we can absorb it and get the maximum nutrients that we're supposed to be getting from the gut. The second thing we have is we have the prebiotics in there. And the prebiotics you want to think about as I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but think about it as miracle grow for the probiotics. It creates a fertile soil so that the probiotics can establish themselves. And we have in our probiotic mix, we have that special endospore type of bacteria, which is called Bacillus coagulants. And that's really a hot topic right now in when it comes to gut pathology, because having the endospore, which an endospore, for those of you who don't understand, means that the bacteria has a shell around it, which makes it impervious to acid and digestive enzymes. So it passes through the stomach and its acidic environment and the small intestines and its alkaline environment, where we can potentially lose as many as 80% of the probiotics we take. And it gets to the gut where it sort of unfolds its shell and begins to do its work. So it can establish itself and help to balance out that environment. So it's coming in, kind of cleans up the neighborhood, so to speak. And that's what we're trying to do, is create that healthy environment in the gut so it can work the way it's supposed to. And by using those things, that's why we have so many great stories that we've heard, George, about people who have seen a decrease in things like their abdominal bloating and their gassiness and problems with constipation that they've had. And, you know, as you say, we're not designed this product to cure, treat, or mitigate any disease or illness. But when you can have an impact on the environment in the gut, it's amazing what the body can do.
Well, it really is amazing. And following the Orenda philosophy of creating a few comprehensive products designed to reestablish the natural and normal balance of key systems of the body as a practitioner makes a lot of sense to you, doesn't it?
Absolutely, George. I mean, that's what it is. It's, the body has all it needs to heal. We just got to get out of our own way. And we have to address the things that contribute to the problems of the gut. And so we have to look real closely at things like diet. We have to look at things like stress management. We have to look at are we sterilizing our life too much? We have to look at our exposures. And then we also have to provide the things that the body needs so it can function most effectively. And I think that's where the Orenda East comes in, because it gives us an effective way to support the appropriate digestion and absorption of nutrients and the balancing of the gut microbiome.
Absolutely. If you want to dive deeply into this subject, there's a book here called Brain Maker by Dr. David Perlmutter. It's a very, very good book. It goes way into depth, but if that's what you want to do, get into that book. But when you get to the page where he recommends what species of probiotics you should have, it's like reading the label right off the Orenda Ease, isn't it?
That's right, George. And you and I both read that book, and really it's eye-opening, because in that book he does talk a lot about the relationship between the gut microflora and the microbiome and these degenerative disorders, which is, we're thinking, well, what's the gut have to do with the brain? And yet it's the release of these inflammatory toxins that go across the blood-brain barrier. But as you say, George, what's interesting is that when he looks at the bacteria, species, and strains that he thinks are most important, it is like reading our ingredient list.
It absolutely is. Well, Dr. Golden, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. This is a critically important issue. If you're listening to this recording on the Orenda application, just follow up with the person that showed you this information, and we will help you get that rebalance in your gut microbiome. Dr. Golden, thanks so much.
My pleasure, George.